The Betrayal of Two Hearts by David Keaton. Chapter 1: The Beginning of Us. The autumn wind carried the scent of change through the tree-lined campus of Westbridge University. The leaves, painted in strokes of amber and crimson, danced to the rhythm of the season. Elena Alvarez stood near the art building with a sketchbook in her arms, her eyes filled with wonder and quiet observation. She was never one to chase attention. Her beauty was soft and understated, long dark hair, warm brown eyes that studied the world like a canvas, and a peaceful grace that made her feel like she belonged in a slower time. Her hands, usually smudged with charcoal or acrylics, clutched the worn cover of her sketchbook like it was a secret diary. It was in that moment Marcus Bennett first saw her. He was hurrying across campus with a stack of law books in one hand and his phone buzzing in the other. Ambition was the rhythm of his life, every step, every choice measured with precision. He was tall, sharp-featured, with thoughtful eyes that hid behind the mask of drive and determination. Their paths crossed, literally, when a gust of wind knocked Elena's sketchbook out of her grip. Pages flapped like wings, tumbling across the grass. "I got it," Marcus called, already chasing down the drifting pages. Elena's laugh, light and surprised, broke the silence. "You don't have to." But he was already crouching beside a bench, gently retrieving a page. It was a portrait of the university clock tower, but with tiny figures dancing in its shadow. One of them looked oddly familiar. "You drew me?" Marcus asked, amused. Her cheeks turned the color of the falling leaves. "You were sitting on the steps that day. I just draw people who look like they have stories." That was the moment it began. What followed were study breaks turned into quiet walks, coffee shops filled with half-finished conversations, and nights where Elena sketched while Marcus read case files. Their differences became the glue that held them together. He found calm in her creativity. She found safety in his focus. Neither of them knew then that the very thing that brought them together, Marcus's drive, would one day pull them apart. But for now, in the golden haze of those early days, their hearts were light, their future unwritten, and love felt as effortless as breath. Chapter 2: Canvas of Dreams. The weeks that followed their first meeting bloomed like wildflowers, unexpected and beautiful. Marcus made a habit of walking Elena to her art studio in the evenings, even when his calendar overflowed with deadlines and court prep. They'd pause beneath the tall oak trees just outside the building, where Elena often lingered with paint smudges on her fingertips and wonder in her eyes. Inside the studio, Elena came alive in a way Marcus had never seen before. Her world was color, contrast, and emotion, bold brushstrokes that spoke the words she sometimes couldn't. She painted late into the night, often humming soft melodies under her breath. Marcus would sit nearby, reading or dozing off, occasionally glancing up to admire the way she disappeared into her art. One night, as rain pattered against the windows, Elena placed a canvas on his lap. "It's not done," she said. "But it's you." Marcus stared at the painting in awe. It wasn't a portrait in the traditional sense, it was abstract. Soft lines formed a silhouette sitting with a book under a golden sky. Around him, shades of blue bled into orange, giving a sense of calm wrapped in chaos. "That's how I see you," she whispered. Marcus, who lived in a world of facts and logic, found himself speechless. No one had ever seen him like this, not even himself. From that night on, they began dreaming together. They talked about building a life, a small home filled with color and laughter, maybe a dog, maybe a child. Elena dreamed of teaching art to kids. Marcus imagined starting his own firm, helping people who couldn't afford proper legal defense. Their love wasn't flashy or loud. It was built in brushstrokes and shared coffees, in silent support and gentle glances. It was a love shaped by hope and built on dreams. But even the most beautiful paintings can hide cracks beneath the surface, cracks no one notices until the colors start to fade. Chapter 3, Late Nights and Lost Calls. The rhythm of their relationship began to shift as the pressure of real life crept in. Marcus had always been ambitious. It was one of the things Elena admired about him. His drive, his discipline, his belief that he could change the world with the right words and well-written arguments. But as his internship at a prestigious law firm turned into a full-time position, his time no longer belonged to him. Or to her. Late nights became the norm. Dinners turned cold on the table. Her calls went to voicemail more often than not. He would text short, clipped replies. Sorry, swamped tonight. Big case. Rain check? Talk soon. I promise. First, Elena understood. She painted through the silence, turning her loneliness into color. She told herself he was just busy, that this was temporary, that the man who once chased her sketchbook through the wind would find his way back. But something was different. He no longer came to the studio. The quiet comfort of their shared nights disappeared, replaced by short phone calls filled with background noise, keyboard clicks, murmured conversations, the occasional sound of laughter that didn't sound like hers. One evening, Elena brought dinner to his office, hoping to surprise him. She waited in the reception area for almost an hour, only to be told by the assistant that Marcus had left for the night hours ago. Her heart sank. She walked back into the rain, the food untouched in her bag, and the growing distance between them heavier than the clouds above. Back home, she sat alone in her studio, staring at a half-finished painting, one of Marcus, smiling with a book in his hand. She dipped her brush in deep blue and slowly, quietly began to paint over his face. Chapter 4, Shadows of the Past. Elena tried to push the doubts away, clinging to the belief that their love could weather anything. But deep in her heart, she knew something had changed. And then, one evening, the truth found her. She had borrowed Marcus's tablet to look up a paint supplier while he was in the shower. A notification popped up, a message preview from someone named Rachel. I've missed you. Last night felt like old times. Her hand froze. Her heart did too. Elena didn't read further. She didn't need to. The name was familiar. Rachel was Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he'd called a closed chapter, someone he had no connection with anymore. But now those words rang hollow. When Marcus returned, she sat on the couch, the tablet in her lap. Her face was calm, too calm. We need to talk, she said. Marcus's expression shifted the moment he saw the message still open on the screen. Elena, it's not what it looks like, he said quickly, stepping forward. It was just a moment. It didn't mean anything. Her voice cracked but stayed steady. It meant enough for you to hide it. He tried to explain. He said the pressure got to him, that he felt lost, that Rachel had reached out and for a second it felt easy, familiar. He swore it was over, that he loved only Elena. But for her, the damage had been done. The foundation they had built, slow, beautiful, and honest, had cracked. It wasn't just the betrayal of touch. It was the betrayal of trust. The nights she spent waiting. The dinners gone cold. The messages ignored while another woman's words filled the silence. Elena stood, walked past him, and closed the door behind her. Inside, the city was quiet, almost cruelly so. She walked aimlessly, her heart aching, not just for what was lost, but for the girl she had been when they first met. Chapter 5, The Message. Elena didn't answer his texts the next day, or the day after that. Marcus sent message after message, apologies, explanations, desperate attempts to rewind time. Please talk to me. I messed up, but I love you. One mistake doesn't erase everything we had. But to Elena, it wasn't one mistake. It was the unraveling of something sacred. She spent those first days in silence, staying with a friend across town. Her world felt quiet and cold, like the colors had drained from her palette. Even painting felt like a betrayal. Every brushstroke reminded her of what they once shared. One afternoon, as she sat on a park bench, she opened her phone and stared at the last unread message from Marcus. It was longer than the others. "I don't know how to make you believe me, but I need you to know this wasn't about her. It was about me, about losing myself in the pressure, the expectations. I leaned on something easy instead of someone real. That's not your fault. Never was. You gave me everything, and I failed you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll always carry this regret. And I'll always love you, even if you never speak to me again." Elena sat for a long time after reading it. She didn't cry. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned off her phone, closed her eyes, and let the breeze pass through her hair. For the first time in days, she breathed without a weight on her chest. Some wounds were too fresh for answers. Some messages were better left unanswered. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Days turned into weeks. Marcus hadn't seen Elena since the night she walked out of his life. He tried calling, texting, even writing long emails, but her silence held firm. He thought about her constantly, where she was, how she was doing, whether she still thought about him too. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, she showed up at his apartment. She knocked softly. He opened the door with both hope and dread pooling in his chest. "Elena." "I'm not here to talk," she said gently but firmly. "I just came to pick up a few things I left behind." Marcus stepped aside silently, watching her as she walked in, her eyes scanning the place they used to spend time in, but never called home together. Her sketchbook still sat on the edge of the coffee table, a mug she once used resting on a shelf in the kitchen. Little remnants of moments, but nothing permanent. She moved calmly, collecting a few books, a scarf, and the framed photo they had taken together after one of her gallery shows. He stood nearby, unsure whether to speak. But he couldn't hold the words back. "I didn't want this," he said. "I didn't either," she replied without looking at him. "I made a mistake, but I still love you." Elena turned to him. Her expression was soft but unwavering. "I believe you, but sometimes love isn't enough," she said. "Not when there's no trust to carry it." She paused by the photo in her hands, then gently set it down and turned it face down on the table. The silence that followed was heavy. She picked up her things and headed for the door. Marcus took a step toward her. "Is this goodbye?" She hesitated, hand on the doorknob. "It's not the end of your story, but it's the end of mine with you." And then she was gone. Chapter 7. Pieces of a Shattered Heart. After Elena left his apartment, Marcus stood alone in the quiet. The apartment still looked the same, but it felt entirely different. The sketchbook she forgot to take still lay on the table. The photo they once laughed over now sat face down, as if to mark the moment something broke that couldn't be repaired. Marcus was used to fixing things with words, with arguments, with logic. But nothing he knew could undo what he had done. He'd hurt someone who gave him her heart with quiet trust and gentle love. And now he lived in the silence she left behind. He stopped sleeping well. He stopped returning calls from friends. His work, once his sanctuary, became a blur of empty winds and restless days. And though he never admitted it out loud, he kept waiting for a message from her. A sign. Anything. But it never came. Meanwhile, Elena poured her grief into her art. Her apartment transformed into a storm of canvases, some vibrant, others dark, but all of them honest. One painting in particular stood apart from the rest, a figure walking alone through a forest of color, their shape unfinished, their path uncertain. She didn't name it. She didn't need to. Some heartbreaks couldn't be spoken, only painted. And still, she missed him. Not the version of him who betrayed her trust, but the man who once chased her sketchbook through autumn wind and stayed up late just to hear her talk about color and light. That man still lived in her memory. But memories weren't enough to rebuild a future. For both of them, this was the chapter of aching silence, the space between the breaking and the healing. Chapter 8. Healing in Color. Elena didn't heal overnight. Some days she still woke up with a tightness in her chest, unsure if she was missing Marcus or just the idea of him. But as the weeks passed, her studio changed. Paintings on her walls were no longer filled only with pain. They began to show light, hope, even joy. One morning, as sunlight poured through her windows, she stepped back to admire a new piece. It was a burst of golden tones swirling into soft pinks and blues, a far cry from the deep blues and harsh reds of weeks past. Piece didn't depict a figure or a forest or even a memory. It was simply movement, energy, and emotion, alive. She smiled for the first time in a while. Didn't mean she had forgotten. It meant she had started remembering who she was before the pain. Elena signed her name in the corner with a careful flourish. Then, for the first time since the breakup, she picked up her phone, not to message Marcus, but to call a gallery owner she'd met months ago. Someone who had asked about featuring her work when she felt too broken to say yes. "I'm ready," she said. Across the city, Marcus was beginning his own journey. He had finally accepted that Elena wasn't coming back, not in the way he once hoped. But her absence had forced him to face himself. He began volunteering at a non-profit legal clinic, helping clients who couldn't afford representation. Gave him purpose again, but more importantly, it humbled him. For the first time, he stopped trying to rewrite the past and started rebuilding his future. Their paths had diverged, but both were finally moving forward. Chapter 9. Regret and Realization. Marcus sat alone on a park bench, staring at the small legal pad in his hands. It was filled with scribbles, notes from a case he had just closed at the Legal Aid Center. He'd won, but there was no thrill in it. Not like there used to be. His life had quieted. No more chasing prestige. No more late nights trying to impress partners who barely remembered his name. Now he helped people with real problems. Families facing eviction, teenagers caught in legal systems too complex for them to navigate alone. He was doing meaningful work. But still there was an ache. He thought about Elena often, how she saw the world through light and color, how she listened before speaking, how she had always encouraged him to do what mattered instead of what looked good on paper. And how he didn't realize the value of that until it was gone. One evening, he found himself walking past the gallery downtown. Posters hung in the window announcing an upcoming exhibition. Reborn in Color, New Works by Elena Alvarez. Opening night, this Friday at 6:30 p.m. Marcus stood there a long time, staring at her name. He didn't know if he should go. He didn't know if he had the right. But he realized something important in that moment. It was never about being forgiven. It was about facing what you broke and growing from it. He smiled faintly. She had found her voice again. And in some way, knowing that helped him find his own. Chapter 10. A Chance Encounter. The night of the gallery opening arrived faster than either of them expected. Elena stood in front of the mirror in her modest apartment, smoothing out the soft fabric of her deep blue dress. Her hair flowed gently over her shoulders, and her earrings, handmade glass drops shaped like teardrops, sparkled in the light. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. It wasn't nerves about the crowd or her work. It was something quieter, deeper, the feeling of stepping into the world again as someone who had been broken and rebuilt. The gallery buzzed with quiet admiration. Strangers and friends milled about, gazing at her artwork, sipping sparkling cider and discussing the pieces in hushed, thoughtful tones. The space was filled with her journey, every wall a chapter. From heartbreak to hope, from grief to growth. Then, through the soft murmur of voices, she felt it, a shift in the air. Presence. Marcus stood near the back wall, hands in his pockets, quietly studying one of her earlier pieces. His posture was respectful, distant, almost unsure if he belonged there. But when their eyes met, something passed between them. Not a spark, not a longing, a recognition. He didn't move toward her. He simply nodded once, a small, sincere gesture that said, "I see you. I respect you. I'm proud of you." And Elena, after a pause, returned the nod. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a rekindling. It was closure. Graceful. Grown. The music swelled gently in the background, and Elena turned her attention back to a woman asking about the painting titled Unfinished Path. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely whole. Chapter 11, Truth in the Silence. The days after the gallery opening passed quietly. Elena returned to her routines, but something in her had shifted. The moment with Marcus hadn't stirred old feelings. Instead, it brought peace, the kind that settles in the soul when you finally lay something to rest. She thought about that brief look between them often. There were no words, no dramatic exchanges, no grand gestures. Just truth, unspoken but deeply felt. In silence, they had acknowledged everything. The love that once bloomed, the pain that followed, and the growth that came after. Elena found herself walking through the park one afternoon, the same park where she once read Marcus's message and turned her phone off. This time, the trees were in bloom and children's laughter floated through the air. Life was moving forward, and so was she. She sat on a bench and pulled out a small sketchbook. No pressure, no plan. Just lines on a page. And as the shapes formed, so did a new vision, not of the past, not of him, but of herself. Across town, Marcus sat in the legal aid office, finishing a long day. His desk was cluttered with folders and coffee cups, but his heart felt clearer than it had in months. He thought about Elena less with sadness now and more with gratitude. She had shown him what real love looked like. And though he lost it, he hadn't wasted it. Some people come into your life to stay. Others come to teach you who you are. Elena had done both. And in the quiet of their separate lives, they had both found the same truth. You don't need to hold on to someone to honor what they meant. Chapter 12, The Crossroads. One Saturday morning, Elena arrived early to set up her art class at the community center. She moved between tables, laying out brushes, watercolor sets, and blank sheets of paper for her students. A boy named Leo burst through the door, waving a rolled-up newspaper above his head. "Miss Elena! Look, someone you know is in this." He dropped the paper on the table and pointed at the front of the Local Faces section. There, in black and white, was Marcus's photo, standing outside the Legal Aid Center, surrounded by volunteers and clients smiling. The headline read, "From law firm to local hero, attorney Marcus Bennett finds purpose in giving back." Elena blinked. She hadn't expected to see him. Not there. Not now. The article told the story of his transition from corporate law to public service, highlighting his work helping underrepresented youth. Described his calm presence, his dedication, and how he'd found his calling in places others overlooked. Elena traced her finger across the edge of the page. Not out of longing, but out of respect. He had grown. And so had she. She smiled gently. Chapter 13, When the Heart Remembers. Summer faded into early fall, and with it came the kind of stillness that allows memories to rise, softly, unexpectedly. Elena sat on the balcony of her apartment one breezy evening, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of tea in her hands. The city below was quiet, lights flickering in windows like stars that had drifted too low. A breeze carried the scent of rain and something familiar. She closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch at the memory of Marcus. Instead, she remembered the good things, the sound of his laugh when she teased him about his terrible cooking, the way he once sat with her for hours while she painted in silence, the night he ran through the wind to catch her sketchbook pages like they were precious. These memories didn't hurt anymore. They simply lived inside her, tucked away like old letters in a box, unopened but not forgotten. Across town, Marcus was walking home from the clinic. The streets were lined with golden leaves, and the chill in the air hinted at winter. He passed by a small bookstore with a mural outside, bright, chaotic, and full of color. He stopped, smiled, and knew without reading the name that it was Elena's work. It reminded him that love doesn't vanish just because it changes shape. Sometimes it becomes something else, quiet admiration, a wish for someone's happiness, a prayer whispered on the wind. He didn't need to reach out. He didn't need to be in her life. But he'd always carry a piece of her with him, and that was enough. Chapter 14, Love, Forgiveness, or Goodbye. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when their paths crossed one last time. Elena had just finished running errands and stopped by a local cafe to sit with a sketchbook and a chai latte. She had taken to sketching people again, strangers passing by, couples holding hands, children chasing pigeons. Not for a project, just for herself. She was flipping to a new page when she heard the soft chime of the cafe door. Marcus stepped inside. He didn't see her right away. He looked older, calmer. There was a stillness about him that hadn't been there before. Not the restless ambition she once knew. Something gentler. When their eyes met, he froze for a heartbeat. Then he smiled. Not the smile of someone trying to fix the past. Just a real one. Elena smiled back. He walked over slowly, stopping just beside her table. "Hi." "Hi," she replied. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. It wasn't awkward, it was full. Full of all the things they had lived through apart. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," she said and meant it. He nodded, glancing at her sketchbook. "Still drawing people?" "Always," she said, flipping it closed. "I saw your mural," he added. "Outside that bookstore." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You liked it." "I stood there for 20 minutes, he said softly. "I didn't want to leave." She smiled again, this time a little wider, a little more human. There was a pause. Not tension. Just a decision waiting in the quiet. They could talk longer. Catch up. Maybe more. But they both knew something. What they had shared was sacred because it ended when it was supposed to. "I'm really glad to see you," Elena said. "Me too," Marcus replied. "Take care of yourself, Elena." "You too, Marcus." They didn't hug. They didn't exchange numbers. They simply smiled once more. And then each walked out into the afternoon sun, different streets, different directions, but both moving forward. Chapter 15, The New Beginning. Autumn returned. The city's trees turned gold again, and the breeze carried the same crisp promise it had the day Marcus first caught Elena's sketchbook. But everything was different now. Elena stood before a room full of children at the community center, each of them painting with joyful chaos. She walked among them, offering encouragement and sharing brushes, her smile as genuine as the art they created. At the back of the room, a small girl held up her painting, a bright, swirling sun rising over a hill. "What's it called?" Elena asked. The girl grinned. The beginning. Elena blinked, then knelt to meet her at eye level. That's a perfect title. After class, she locked up the studio and stepped into the cool air. She had plans that evening, not grand but meaningful. A solo dinner. A new book. A fresh canvas waiting by her easel. Across the city, Marcus walked out of the clinic into the same golden air, carrying a folder under one arm and a bag of groceries in the other. He passed a couple holding hands, smiled quietly, and kept walking. At a corner, a woman brushed past him, dropping her scarf. He picked it up and tapped her shoulder, returning it with a kind smile. Careful, the wind's tricky this time of year. She laughed, thanked him, and moved on. So did he. Their paths never crossed again, not because they couldn't, but because they no longer needed to. Both of them had arrived at something new. Something strong. Not the life they planned, but the one they built from the pieces of their hearts, mended, matured, and whole. Moral of the story. Love doesn't always end with forever. Sometimes it ends with growth. And that too is a beautiful beginning. Copyright 2025 David Keaton. All rights reserved.